Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Eerie News, and today we've got a lot of interesting stuff to get into, believe me. And let's start off by something from another part of the world, right? This is out of Stranger Than Fiction Stories. And you know what? And you're going to think, well, you know what? Sometimes we're so modern and caught up with phones and with technology and everything, who believes in certain things, but you'd be surprised, superstition sometimes is very strong, even in our country, even in America, but especially in other places, especially, and I want to say sometimes the more remote or the more dangerous the location or whatever it is that you're doing. This is like beyond the people that wear lucky socks to the ball game kind of deal. But anyway, this is titled The Devil You Know. His face is chalky with eyes as dark as his mustache. The mouth is open below nostrils blackened from cigarette smoke, and his name is Uncle. For the native population in the Andes, this tradition has produced hundreds of these devils, which are found throughout mines in South America. The whole Altiplano region, extending to neighboring countries, believe in this king of the underground. The typical statue is a horned devil or figure in the shape of a goat representing the devil. It's covered with varied adornments, sitting on a throne with hands extended to receive his due. The feet are shod in rubber mining boots. Hard to miss is his erect penis to remind those who come before him of his virility. This devil's kingdom is Bolivia's tin mines, even though no miner will refer to him as supe, which is the Quechua word for devil. Instead, the more familial tío, or Spanish for uncle, is used. Tío protects miners from accidents as they work in the deep black holes, but he can also bring harm. Part of his allure is that he can bring prosperity in the quest for veins of tin and silver. In order to placate Tío to both avert disaster or for his generosity, homage is paid him through Pachamama. What he is given depends on the day of the week. Coca leaves, hand rolled cigarettes on Tuesday and Friday, accompanied by white rum to quench his thirst. Etio is believed to reward those who pay him tribute and to punish those who violate a taboo, such as eating in the mine, eating salty food before entering, or bringing a woman to the mine. Anyone wearing a skirt, whether it's a woman or a clergyman, is despised by El Tío. Sometimes this devil collapses a mine for no reason other than to restock his energy. The miners perform chala each carnival Tuesday, pouring the earth around his image with chicha, which is rum or beer. He is surrounded by food, and confetti garlands are draped around his neck. This ritual is performed by Yatari, or indigenous witch doctors, once a year in February or March, on the eve of the street parade of the Oruro Carnival. It is one of Bolivia's biggest festivals and is listed by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage. Another blood sacrifice known as Huilancha is performed differently. The miners take a live llama and place it in a mining cart with offerings impregnated with alcohol and kerosene, lighting it as it enters the depths of the mines. The animal is incinerated alive and afterwards consumed by the participants. What is left is buried as part of the payment to Dio and his mine. The offerings are supposedly meant to repay the earth for the minerals taken by the miners. Carnival time is when El Tío leaves the mine, disguised as Lucifer, where he dances with other demons. Women are strictly forbidden from entering mines or participating in ceremonies, as there is a fear the veins of minerals will disappear. Even women who have lost their husbands in mining accidents, and known as paliris, must work outside the mines where they scavenge through piles of debris. One day before August 1st comes the toast of Caracu, where a llama is sacrificed. The animal's blood is poured on the threshold of the mine, and the rest is splattered on the walls. Some miners smear their faces with the blood as well, taken from the still beating heart of the animal. This is considered good luck. The llama's heart, once removed, is placed at the statue's feet. After this, everyone must leave the mine so El Tío can enjoy his meal, since the blood and hearts of the animal are his favorite meal. The Tío Devil is found throughout the mining districts of the central Andes. The Mucui, similar to the Tío, is found in Peru's Ticlio, Morococha, Cerro de Pasco, and other mines. The Muki must also be appeased in order to receive his protection. Despite the offerings made to the devil uncle and other similar demons, in the Cerro Rico mountain in Potosi, 8 million men have since pre-Columbian times. The belief is that if El Tío is not fed, he will feed on human flesh, so it appears he is a hungry devil. All right. Um, Statues of El Tío are found throughout the mines, where miners go and sit with the idols to keep him company, since he doesn't like to be left alone. Despite the miners identifying as Catholic, most of them believe that God cannot be found in the depths of the mines. Only El Tío can protect them as they scramble down narrow passages into the bowels of the earth. The sacrifices made to El Tío recall the earlier religious ceremonies from the Inca Empire prior to the arrival of Europeans known as Capacocha. In the 1990s, remains of sacrificed children victims were found on the Ambato and Pichu Pichu volcanoes in southern Peru. 3 bodies were found at Ambato at 19,000 feet. The Pichu Pichu Capacocha were on a constructed platform at 18,000 feet. Capacochas were done to bless shrines in response to catastrophes and to celebrate major construction activities, especially if it involved irrigation. The rituals were also performed annually at the Temple of the Sun in Cusco. The victims were young virginal women or children who had no imperfections. However, there has been evidence that children sacrificed suffered from serious diseases. In a dig that lasted from 1995 to 1999, a total of 20 persons were found ranging in age from 3 to 15 years of age. The children were killed by a blow to the head, buried while alive, and others were strangled or had their heart removed. One of the remains found at Pichu Pichu displayed cranial modification in an oblique manner done since infancy, which caused elongation. Pichu Pichu is a deity that shepherds make offerings to in order to gain his protection for themselves and their herds. Children were sacrificed at the summits at Ambato and the volcano Pichu Pichu, since these mountains are believed to be deities. Remains of sacrificed children have been found throughout the years. These are some of them. First one is the girl Tanta Carhua, she was found in Cusco, Peru. According to the chroniclers, Tanta Carhua was a 10-year-old natural child of Ocros, who was offered by his father in exchange for being named cacique. I think a cacique was like a chieftain. After being taken to Cusco, where she participated in the celebrations of worship of the sun and the Inca, the girl returned to her native town in the company of notable representatives of her people. Dressed like a princess, ascended to the top of the mountain. She was numbed with a special drink and placed in a hole about 3 meters deep, which was then sealed. Among those who witnessed the event was the girl's father, who was converted into a cacique by the reigning Inca as retribution for having given his daughter. The Lady of the Ampato, she's from Arequipa, Peru. It is known that approximately in the year 1540, the volcano Sabancaya erupted, and the locals, to placate the wrath of the volcano, offered 3 live girls as a sacrifice. These had to be worshipped by the people of the place for some years, but with the passage of time, they fell into oblivion, perhaps because it was very difficult to ascend to the mountain of more than 90,000 feet. In 1990, the volcano returned to activity, which left exposed Inca remains. Several feet deep, a surprising discovery was unearthed during an excavation. It was a funeral bier in which the body of a frozen girl, who was later baptized as the Juanita Mommy, was found in the fetal positions and covered by a blanket. Near her were 2 other girls, and it is probable that they were also part of the sacrifice. The next one is the children of Salta. They were found in Salta, Argentina. In 1999, at the summit of Yuyaco volcano, the American archaeologist Johann Reinhardt found the intact bodies of 2 girls and 1 child whose organs were intact, so much so they still had blood in their hearts and lungs. They also had food in their digestive system. The gentle expression of their faces suggests they did not suffer at the time of their death. Possibly they were drugged before being sacrificed. The child of Cerro El Plomo, this is in Santiago de Chile. More than 50 years ago, Chilean muleteers discovered the frozen body of a child on one of the highest peaks of the Andes Mountains in front of the city of Santiago. The news traveled the world. At that time, the mummy of El Cerro, El Plomo, was the archaeological discovery, was realized at a height of over 17,000 feet. The body of the child was in a perfect state of preservation due to the fact that it remained buried permanently in the frozen soil, thus preventing its decomposition. In 2011, at a site known as Juan Chaquito Las Llamas, 42 children and 67 llamas were initially found. 7 years later, the site has revealed the remains of 140 children and 200 llamas. The victims were both boys and girls between the ages of 5 and 14. Examination of the remains found the children's hearts were ripped from their bodies. The victims were brought from various regions within the Chimu Empire. At Huanchaco, the remains of 227 children were unearthed, making it the largest known child sacrifice site in the world. This slaughter was done during the time of the Chimu Empire, when the Chimu Empire was in power. The reason for sacrificing so many children from around the Chimu Empire has remained unknown, but could have been attributed to a form of population control or psychological intimidation. Other studies point out that some of the ritual massacres in the Andes range back to pre-Inca times, but their numbers and sophistication increased with the expansion of the empire from its capital, Cusco. These studies indicate that Capacocha, the sacrifice of children, was used as a means of social control. According to these, the tombs acted as warnings designed to instill fear in the conquered peoples. Animals are sacrificed from ancient times into the present, such as those given over to El Tío. They are adorned with colored strings, earrings, and necklaces. In 2018, 4 llama mummies were discovered under the floor of a building. They were ritually sacrificed at the beginning of the 15th century. The site is known as Tambo Viejo. 3 white llamas were killed to appease the sun god and 1 brown llama to the creator god. Several dozen guinea pigs were killed as well. For the Incas, llamas were only second to human beings in their value as sacrificial offerings. Radiocarbon dating of the 4 animals date the remains to between 1432 to 1459. They were not cut or stabbed, so researchers believe they were buried alive, as was done to humans who were sacrificed. Intact discoveries like this one confirm accounts of early Spaniards in South America, which described that the Incas sacrificed animals by the hundreds. Juan Diez de Betanzos was a Spanish chronicler who provided a description of the Inca civilization. He based his information on the testimony of his wife, Quixirime Ocolo, or Doña Angelina, who once married Atahualpa, an Inca king. He also interviewed Inca who took part in the Battle of Cajamarca. He wrote that a large number of children were buried alive after remodeling of the Temple of the Sun was completed. Betanzos described that when an Inca died, 1,000 children were buried with him, most of them females between the ages of 4 and 5. Bartolomé Alvarez was a Spanish priest and chronicler who served as a doctrinero, or missionary priest, in the region of Charcas, within the Viceroyalty of Peru, during the late 16th century. He arrived in the region of Charcas, which is modern-day Bolivia, in the 1570s, initially working in Potosi until 1581, then in Zabaya. His writings provide valuable insight into the religious and social dynamics of the colonial Andes during the late 1500s. He wrote where some very young women destined to Capacocha accepted their destination with pleasure, but those who did not wish to die were drugged or intoxicated and then sacrificed. Bernabé Cobo, he died in 1657, was a Jesuit missionary, scholar, and writer, and spent most of his life in Peru and Mexico. He is best known for his work Historia del Nuevo Mundo, which translates to History of the New World. His descriptions are known for their accuracy. His work was mostly overlooked until the 19th century. He is credited with bringing cinchona bark, a source of quinine, to Europe during a visit in 1632. In 1639, Cobo wrote, quote, "They were killed by strangulation on a rope. Sometimes they were drunk before being killed." End quote. Pedro Sarmiento de Gamboa was a Spanish adventurer, historian, mathematician, and astronomer. At one point, he was accused by the Inquisition of possessing 2 magic rings and some magic ink, and following the precepts of Moses. He arrived in Peru in 1557. He joined the expedition led by Alvaro de Mendaña, who searched the southern Pacific Ocean and came across the Solomon Islands in 1568. Gamboa gave the leader indications on how to find Terra Australis Incognita, but de Mendaña discounted them and the expedition never reached New Zealand and Australia. Instead of further exploration, de Mendaña decided to return to home port in Peru. However, he wanted to take credit for the discoveries for himself. He threw Gamboa's writings overboard and abandoned him in Mexico. Eventually, a trial was held where the right man was given credit for the discovery. In 1572, Gamboa wrote, "I affirm that on the Capacocha party children were immolated before the idol of Huanacaure." He served as a governor of the Strait of Magellan, which is by southern Chile, by the authority of King Philip II in 1580. In 1584, Sarmiento de Gamboa was captured by the English as he headed to Europe. He was presented to Queen Elizabeth I, and they spoke in Latin, the only language they could converse in. Felipe Guaman Poma de Ayala was also known as Guaman Poma or Guaman Poma. He was a Quechua nobleman and a direct descendant of the Inca royal family through his mother. He learned to speak, read, and write Spanish from his half-brother Martín de Ayala, a mestizo priest. He gained access to the library belonging to the Mercedarian friar Martin de Murua, thereby furthering his education. He served as an administrator and scribe within the colonial government of the Viceroyalty of Peru. De Ayala wrote that the Capacocha was a celebration held twice a year in which children were sacrificed. For many years, the descriptions made by Spanish priests, scholars, and conquistadors of human sacrifice throughout Mesoamerica were thought to be prejudiced and exaggerated. However, archaeological excavations have found that they were accurate, not only in the fact that sacrifices took place, but in the amount of persons killed, especially children. This is a place called La Rinconada, Peru, known also as El Infierno de las Alturas, which translates to Hell in the Heights. This mining town is located near a gold mine which is over 16,700 feet above sea level. The population at one time was estimated to be about 30,000. It is known as the lawless city of Peru. It is located in the Inca region on the side of Mount Ananea and at the foot of the Ouachita Glacier. The average annual temperature is 34 degrees Fahrenheit. The economy is driven by gold mining run by illegal mining companies who operate by what is known as cachorreo, where the miners work for a month without pay and they are allowed to work one day for themselves, where they can take as much ore as they can carry on their shoulders. Women are banned from working in the mines. However, palaqueras work outside sifting through what is discarded. Oh. The town is plagued by murder and crime. Women and minors are trafficked and most of the victims of sexual exploitation. The average life expectancy is 35 years. Hypoxia, extreme weather conditions, and violence account for short lifespans. In 2019, 7 dead miners were found in a tunnel beneath the mountain. They had all been shot in the head. About 100 to 300 bars that also operate as brothels exist in the town, and around 4,500 women from Peru, Bolivia, and Colombia work there as prostitutes. The majority are minors who have been kidnapped or brought there under false pretenses. In April 2024, 3 security guards were shot by a group of hooded men. In November 2024, a hotel worker found the bodies of Lourdes Mamani Olarte, who was killed by persons unknown. These are only a few of several homicides that take place and are never investigated or solved. The town has Peru's highest murder rate. There is no plumbing or sewer system, and pollution has contaminated food and water sources. The populace lived in metal shacks surrounded by mountains of garbage. There is also significant contamination by mercury of the drinking water and nearby glacier due to the mining practices. It's affected the soil and animals that live in the area, especially if they are down the mountainside. Like other miners, those at La Rinconada try to placate the lord of the underworld, but they have their own version. Their effigies known as los abuelos or the grandparents. They are similar to a tío, however, they are four dolls with elderly faces and each is decorated in mining garb. Each mouth has a cigarette or cigar, and the story is that the figure smokes their own cigars. The grandfather has women's underwears on his legs. It's believed human sacrifice have been given to these entities since it's the greatest chaya and it ensures the gold keeps coming. Women who get drunk are taken to the mines and sacrificed there. If the woman is a virgin, it is the most powerful offering. Since there are no census or registration of any type, there is no record of who lives or dies in La Rinconada. There are also thieves in the mountains known as primos, which translates to cousins, who kill the miners and take their equipment. There are no tourists due to the extreme danger of coming to this place, especially after dark. The grandparents, they are four demonic dolls that are outside the Rinconada mine in Puno in Peru. For many years, miners have provided different offerings, including cigarettes, fruits, and alcoholic beverages, but the most striking offerings are women's breeches. And I think by breeches I mean underwear. According to their own customs, the underwear of a virgin woman is better received by grandparents who in return give them more gold. Yes, from what I understand, forget the tourist. It's extremely dangerous to go there, even if you're a native Peruvian, because there's like talk about 1,000 different ways to die. There, yes, yes. So they really they believe that this is how they take the superstition very very seriously. Unfortunately for the victims, as you can see though, there's a history of that. And these people, whether the Quechua or whatever, in these different countries of Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, there's a history there where if you wanted to placate whatever god it was, you human sacrifice. Modern times, I think that it happens more often in places like La Rinconada, which there's nobody there to say, "What are you doing?" or "Hey, where'd that new young girl that was, kidnapped from somewhere in Colombia or Chile or Peru, where did she go?" Oh, no, she was sacrificed to los abuelos or something like that. I mean, there's nobody there. From what if you read about this place, there is no law. It's when they say lawless, they absolutely mean lawless. Okay, next story is also out of Stranger Than Fiction stories, and it's called The Disappearance of Donna. All right, and let's see. You might think that anyone can go missing in any place for any reason, but in a rural town that in 1968 had a population of less than 100, there it's hard to understand how a woman could vanish so completely. Talk about disappearances, right? It was a brisk fall night in November 1968 when Donna Jean Michalenko was seen at Earl's Bar, a solitary watering hole in the town of Keefe, North Dakota. She left with her date around midnight and no one has laid eyes on her again. Keefe was a farming community settled by immigrants from Ukraine, Russia, and Germany at the turn of the century. It started off as a depot station for the Sioux Line Railroad and incorporated in 1908. It achieved a peak population of 307 in 1920. Donna Jean Haight married Bertold, aka Bert Michalenko, in 1946. Both of their families were from the area. They had three children and divorced in 1964. The children lived with their father, however, she still visited them there. Donna lived separately in her own place in Butte. Bert remarried in 1974. He was a successful farmer and businessman in the Butte and Keefe area. He was a former mayor of Butte and also served on the city council. Professor Eric Grabowski, a private citizen, took an interest in this case and has researched extensively through interviews with family and open source materials more information about the circumstances surrounding Donna's disappearance. According to him, Donna was romantically involved with a man he refers to as B.L. There was also a history of violence between them, including the last time they were seen at Earl's Bar, which was on November 9th, 1968. It wasn't until December 27th, 6 weeks after she disappeared, that Donna was reported missing by her 21-year-old daughter. Since Donna was known to travel throughout the state to visit family or to sightsee, it took that long before the family realized that something was wrong. When BL, which was still alive in 2017, who owned a farm nearby, was questioned about Donna's whereabouts, he said he dropped her off at her ex-husband's house in Butte, where her children lived. According to those at the house, she never arrived. It seems strange he would not take her to where she lived. He was considered a suspect in Donna's disappearance. However, as time passed, the investigation stalled out. Professor Grabowski did find out that Donna owned a dog named Trixie that disappeared at the same time. The animal was later found shot to death inside a Lutheran church. He also mentions a tie-in to Maury Terry's book, The Ultimate Evil, where it describes direct links to secret cults or Satanists practicing in the area of Minot, North Dakota in those years. Strangely enough, there's also a parallel to the sacrifice of dogs in several hidden locations where covens would meet in New York City, including the desecration of houses of worship. These individuals were known to travel between Minot, North Dakota, and boroughs in New York City. In 1974, Arliss Perry, 19, was murdered inside Stanford Memorial Church 2 weeks before Halloween. Her body was posed and mutilated in what appeared to be some type of ritual murder. She had grown up in Bismarck, North Dakota, and had moved to California only 6 weeks before, after she married her high school sweetheart who was studying for his medical degree. Arliss was interred on October 18th at Sunset Memorial Gardens in Bismarck. Most of those who attended the wedding were present for the funeral rites. 2 weeks later on Halloween, something strange happened. The temporary marker placed on her gravesite was stolen. No other marker in the cemetery was taken. The police found that a couple of trophies were taken from the murder scene. Could the marker have been another one? Was there an unknown cult operating in the sparse landscape of North Dakota that committed murders but weren't pursued because their victims were not found and, like Donna, were just deemed missing persons? Donna Jean Haight was born on September 15, 1929, to parents Martin Haight and Emma Engel, who married on January 28, 1929. She had twin siblings born in January 1934. Lester died soon after birth, and Marilyn died a few months later. Her father, Martin, committed suicide in 1956 by shooting himself in the head. There was nothing known in her background to provide a clue as to what happened to her. A 2009 news article wrote of her as someone who decorated wedding cakes and whose children, described as an artist, volunteered in her community and would do anything to help a neighbor in need. Remains have never been recovered that have been linked to her, so there is no DNA material to match to any of her relatives. None of her belongings were ever taken, or any of her money used after she disappeared. Present-day Keefe is considered a ghost town with less than 10 inhabitants. All the businesses are shut down and the people have moved away. In a place of wide open spaces, a body could be thrown in a field or buried and remain unfound for years. Was this the fate of Donna Jean Michalenko? Now, this is another story from that area. It's called The Lost Boy. Close to where Donna disappeared, another strange story unfolded decades before. It involved a teenage boy who lived in Dogden. In 1890, a post office was named after nearby Dogden Butte. The town was founded in 1904 as Pearlie and then changed to Dogden in 1906. The populace was so scarce that in 1904 the post office closed, but there were still farmers working the land. On June 29, 1909, the Grand Forks Herald published a story about a lost boy. His name was Efimenko Potarenko, 14, who worked for Peter Michalenko, Bert's father. His family lived about 9 miles south of Dogden. The teenager was sent into the pastures to get some horses. Almost 2 hours passed, and Michalenko sent out one of his young sons to find out what happened to him. The child returned saying he couldn't find him. Then Michalenko's son-in-law was sent out. He found young Potarenko lying still in the field as if he were dead. He tried to revive him, but Potarenko did not respond. The son-in-law brought a horse team and took him back to the house. He was breathing and stirred a bit. A message was sent to Keefe to call Dr. Evan C. Stone at Balfour. The doctor, upon examining the young man, found he was unconscious and bleeding from his mouth, nose, and ears. The doctor was not optimistic of his recovery, but the next day the bleeding had stopped and everyone continued to hope. Nothing else was ever published about what happened to Efime Potarenko allowing even for misspelling of his first and last name. There is no explanation from Dr. Stone as to how a teenage boy ended up unconscious and bleeding. Was he attacked, or was there another cause? Right. And that's, it's the okay, because you mostly think of somebody that's bleeding from their mouth, their ears, and their nose, that they were, um, I don't know, hit in the head. Because I even thought, well, you know, maybe a horse or a mule or something kicked him. But from according to what they were saying, he had no visible injuries that would account for what happened to him. One of those things, and this again, this is the middle of nowhere, of nothing. And that's what happens. You could like probably throw somebody away and they could be lying there like not that far away. Anyway, still stranger than fiction stories. This is, since let's keep going to like the weird stuff. This is called the Dry Bones. In May 1875, in the city of Montgomery, Alabama, on the corner of Market and Lawrence Street stood a derelict building. It was described as a poor, perturbed spirit made its presence known to any who came close to it. The year is 1875, and this building stood opposite to the Montgomery Hall and was one of the oldest buildings in the city. The upper floors were once occupied by the State Journal printing office, but as the years passed, it fell into disrepair and became dilapidated. The space was taken over as a flop house, and the lower floor was a large hall known as Freely Hall, used also as a carriage and wagon repository and a bar room. Persons passing by the structure said they felt a peculiar sensation as if they were by themselves in a graveyard. One night about 8 o'clock, those living upstairs heard a strange noise in the hall below. Some of them put their heads through the holes in the floor of their room where panels were missing. They thought that they were being robbed. They called out, "Who's that?" Several voices shrieked out, "Who is you, I say?" Then the clanking of chains echoed through the hall. Then it was followed by a low rumbling sounds, groans, shrieks, and a steady tramp, 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 as though 1,000 soldiers were marching to their eternal bivouac. "Ghost!" one of the occupants shouted, and they left the building, their eyes dilated to the size and brightness of a Wethersfield onion. The alarm spread over the neighborhood. Men with guns, women with pokers, and children all gathered to see and catch the ghost. They retold stories about ghosts, but none dared to go near the house. Some brave souls eventually went into the hall and returned with stories that the ghost blew his breath on their cigar, and another said he got close to him and it made a grab at him, and his arm went through just like he was missed. Another said that as he was sneaking in through the window, the ghost, who was standing in the far end of the hall, jerked his own head off and threw it at him, knocking him about 10 feet back out of the window. The ridiculous stories demoralized the crowd, who now numbered about 200, and it was finally resolved that it was up to the mayor and the city council to run out the ghosts. Finally, one man said he wasn't afraid of ghosts. If 40 men would follow him, he would go in the house and find who was there, dead or alive. As he finished his speech, a big fat woman standing in the crowd raised her hands above her head and screamed, "Lordy, look yonder! He's coming out of the window!" In a few seconds, not a mother, son, or daughter were to be seen in 4 squares of the place. It was observed that every occupied room in a square of that house had a light burning throughout the entire night. A few nights later, the rumor was that the ghost had reappeared at the same place. A large number of people congregated at the corner of the haunted house to watch what would happen. Again, strange sounds and groans were plainly heard. This time the ghost replied to questions from the crowd. He stated that his name was Rogers and that he was murdered in that building 42 years before, and that his family were now in indigent circumstances. He added that he was accompanied by the spirit of a woman who was murdered at Mount Meigs before the war. He stopped talking except to say he would return the following night and reveal the whole mystery. Since the appearance of the ghost, many stories were told of former mysterious appearances in the hall. Someone had kept a skating rink there several years ago who said he closed it because he saw it several different times, 2 strange figures passing the hall at night after he closed the doors. The next day, about 2,000 people gathered to witness the third appearance of the ghost. There was no ghost, and mediums said the spirits informed them They would appear if the crowd was smaller and less boisterous. However, the ghosts didn't keep their word, and the story faded from the newspapers. In 1857, close to the railroad, there was a strong suspicion that a woman had been killed in Knoxville, Alabama. A body was discovered with a hideous amount of cotton, with pieces of whalebone scattered promiscuously around it. Some believe the woman had been murdered. The remains were taken to the coroner. The matter was kept quiet with hopes of finding clues to the guilty parties. Her identity was never established, much less who did this to her. The description of what was found by the railroad was just as elusive. What else besides cotton and whalebone was left? Apparently enough to take to the coroner. If there was ever a reason to haunt a death like this would be it. There was a train station at Mount Meigs. Was this the unfortunate woman that haunted the old building in Montgomery, which was only 14 miles away? And that's one of the things that you find out about, those times where, the trains were like the main form of transportation, is that, how can I say, there was, sometimes, yes, people, especially people that worked, they were killed by trains, they fell, they got run over. There was another set that decided to commit suicide by getting run over, like throwing themselves in front of the train. But there was also another set, which sometimes it was, and this is what made it difficult, that these people had been murdered, but what they would do is they would throw the bodies or place the bodies on the railroad tracks and let the train run it over, because they knew that by the time the body was recovered, the coroner or anybody doing it, it would be very difficult to find that the person was murdered, or that in other words, that the person was dead, because the body was so mangled that the coroner said, I can't figure out if this person was dead to begin with, if they were killed. So, yeah, you find that a lot of, they would do that just to make it believe, as in that this person, in some cases, either tripped, fell, because believe it or not, or committed suicide. And really, in reality, what it was a murder. Now, this other story is out of Mysterious Universe, and it's titled Cursed and Evil Places of Australia. One theme that I have often touched on in various articles is the question of whether an actual place can be evil. Are there sometimes malevolent forces that permeate a place to the point that it can be considered evil and cursed? Many places in the world harbor such places, and here we are going to look at a selection of such ominous places in Australia. One of the most well-known cursed or evil places in Australia is a location called Black Mountain. Rising from the wilderness of Queensland, Australia, it is an eerie sight that stands in stark contrast to the brush and eucalyptus trees around. It is a colossal blackened jumble of enormous boulders that looks less like a natural formation than something that was intentionally dumped here by giant hands. Long heavily associated with bizarre, unexplained phenomena and intertwined with dark folklore, the Black Mountain is a strange place long shunned and feared by the indigenous people, and the region is made no less ominous by sightings of strange occurrences, unexplained lights, and the numerous people who have come here never to return. Black Mountain is located in the Black Mountain National Park in Queensland, Australia, which is located about 16 miles south of Cooktown. The nature of the bizarre mound certainly makes its appearance conducive to scary stories and myths. From a distance, Black Mountain looks like a solid monolith of black looming over the primeval forest around it. But on closer inspection, one can see it is composed of gigantic granite boulders, many of which measure up to 20 feet long and soars up 900 feet over the surrounding landscape. These boulders were formed from solidifying magma around 250 million years ago, lack any trace of surface soil, and have a distinct black coloration caused by a thin coating of iron and manganese oxides, as well as a film of blue-green algae covering the exposed surfaces. The black coloration gives the boulders a sinister, forbidding appearance, as if they had been scorched by the fires of hell itself. The rocks are jumbled upon one another, forming labyrinths of mazes and passages, penetrating within the mountains, which belch forward gusts of hot air accumulated from the daytime heat. This heat lends the rocks other odd properties. The boulders become hot in the sun, and when cold rain falls on them, they slowly fracture and disintegrate over time, occasionally in a violent, explosive manner, only adding to the ominous, intimidating atmosphere pervading the place. In addition, the hot air moving through the underground passages and abysses creates eerie sounds that have variously been described as sounding like moaning, screaming, crying, wailing, and deep hissing. A rotten stench also reportedly seeps from somewhere far below the surface from time to time. With such a creepy appearance and demeanor, perhaps it is no surprise that Black Mountain has a long history of dark legends and myths. The Kuku Yunkal people of the region have long shunned the mountain, calling it Kajaka, meaning the place of the spear, and sometimes translated simply as the Mountain of Death. Aboriginal tales tell of the mountain as a haunted place, home to various evil spirits and demons lurking within, which are said to hunger for human souls, one of which is the spirit of a wicked medicine man called the Eater of Flesh. Stories tell of any unfortunate who approaches the mountain being dragged to their death within its bowels by spectral hands, and shadowy ghosts are often allegedly seen there. Adding to this atmosphere of dread is the brutal massacre of Aboriginal people at the hands of early European settlers that supposedly took place in a nearby ravine, the ghosts of which are said to still dwell there, screaming for revenge. Although several other rocks and caves in the vicinity hold religious significance and are considered to be sacred by the Aborigines, to this day they refuse to go near Kalkajaka. Indeed, well into modern times, Black Mountain has been ground zero for a wide variety of high strangeness. It is said that animals are spooked by the mountain and that it exudes some evil force that has been reported to disrupt the navigational equipment of airplanes flying nearby. Planes mostly avoid flying near the mountain due to these unexplained anomalies, as well as the strange air turbulence that is experienced within the vicinity. A 1991 aerial survey conducted by the Bureau of Mineral Resources to test for magnetic disturbances and radiation levels on the mountain turned up nothing unusual, yet the reports of these phenomena from pilots persist. It may not be so surprising that Black Mountain is also home to a good amount of UFO activity and reports of strange lights. Black Mountain is also said to have cavernous underground chambers that are purported to hold everything from alien bases to lost civilizations, ancient tombs, and priceless lost treasures. Some of the treasures are said to reside within the depths of the many caves and are lost stockpiles of gold, historic artifacts, and ancient texts. One of the stranger things said to be lying under the mountain is a secret alien base from which UFOs emerge, and which is inhabited by a race of reptilian alien humanoids that keep human slaves. Those who buy this far out idea further explain that the arrangement of the boulders is obviously artificial, and that the entire mountain was built by the aliens themselves. Others speculate that the boulders were laid down by some ancient lost civilization millennia ago, and that this society thrived deep under the mountain in an enormous hollowed out domain. Some think such a civilization is still there. Other bizarre tales revolve around the strange beasts said to inhabit the mountain. Although the area is indeed home to many unique and endemic species, there are tales of creatures lurking here that are far weirder than one might imagine. Within the craggy maze of intertwined boulders are said to lurk enormous pythons that are not shy about attacking human beings. There's also an enigmatic large cat-like predator known as the Queensland tiger that is thought to prowl the area and has been blamed for cattle mauling and mutilations that have occurred in the surrounding area. Occasional reports of large reptilian humanoids emerging from the underground tunnels and crevices have also surfaced from the mountain. Additionally, there are numerous stories of fleeting, shadowy shapes that stalk the mountain, but it is unclear whether these represent some type of real animal, a more supernatural phenomena, or merely a trick of shadow and light upon the black boulders. Perhaps the most well-known and indeed scariest phenomena related to Black Mountain is the multitude of mysterious disappearances that have taken place here. There are numerous stories of horses and even whole herds of cattle vanishing here as if swallowed by the mountain itself. But even more menacing are the stories of the many people who have allegedly come here and disappeared without a trace. While Aborigines have stories of their people vanishing at the mountains since long before Europeans arrived, The first modern account of an unexplained disappearance here dates to 1877 when a courier by the name of Grainer went out on horseback looking for a stray calf, only for the man, the horse, and the calf to never return. Widespread searches of the mountain turned up no trace of the animals or the courier, and it was assumed that they had fallen into one of the many jagged chasms between the boulders. A few years after this, a notorious criminal known as Sugarfoot Jack and a couple of his accomplices fled to Black Mountain following a shootout. They were never seen again, and despite the exhaustive police search that followed, there was no evidence at all to hint at where they had gone. They had simply vanished. The disappearances only increased in number and weirdness over the years. One of the more well-known tales allegedly occurred 13 years after the disappearance of Sugarfoot Jack. A Constable Ryan, who was stationed in nearby Cooktown, tracked a fugitive to Black Mountain, along with other trackers, only for the trail to abruptly end at the mouth of one of the caves, as if the criminal had just stepped off the face of the earth. Ryan entered the cave to see if the fugitive might be hiding inside, but according to those present, he never came back out, and no one else was willing to risk going in after him. Neither the criminal nor Constable Ryan was ever seen again. In another case, a local man by the name of Harry Owens was out looking for stray cattle, and when he did not return, his partner, George Hawkins, informed the police and went out looking for him. When Hawkins did not return either, the police launched a search of the mountain for the two missing men. According to the account, two police officers ventured into one of the caves, and only one of them emerged. When the lone officer came out from the darkness, he was reportedly completely unhinged and so terrified of whatever he had seen that he could not give a coherent report of what had happened. In the 1920s, two professional cave explorers who journeyed to the mountain to try and solve the enigma of these disappearances went missing themselves, as well as some trackers who went looking for them. More recently, in 1932, a backpacker named Harry Page went missing while hiking on Black Mountain and was later found dead from unknown causes. The list goes on. In all cases except for the body of Page, no evidence was ever found to hint at what had happened to any of these people, and extensive police investigations have never been able to come to any conclusion on the causes of their disappearances. It is as if the mountain itself swallowed them, which is not far from the official theory concerning the vanishings. It is mostly believed that these people most likely fell into the numerous caves, crevices, and chasms of the mountain, or became hopelessly lost when trying to venture into the impenetrably dark passages. Whether this is what happened remains unknown. There have also been very few people to brave the mountain caves and return to tell the tale. One experienced bushman who penetrated the mountain armed with a pistol and flashlight gave a harrowing account of his experience within. Quote, I stepped into the opening. Like other Black Mountain caves, it dipped steeply downward, narrowing as it went. Suddenly, I found myself facing a solid wall of rock. But to the right, there was a passageway, just large enough for me to enter in a stooping position. I moved along it carefully for several yards. The floor was fairly level, the walls of very smooth granite. The passage twisted and turned this way and that, always sloping deeper into the earth. Presently, I began to feel uneasy. A huge bat beat its wings against me as it passed. However, I forced myself on. To push further, soon my nostrils were filled with a sickly, musty stench. Then my torch went out. I was in total darkness. From somewhere that seemed the bowels of the earth, I could hear faint moaning, which was then followed by the flapping of wings of thousands of bats. I began to panic as I groped and floundered back the way I thought I had come. My arms and legs were bleeding from bumps with unseen rocks. My outstretched hands clawed at space. I expected solid walls and floors, but could not find it. At one stage, where I had wandered into a side passage, I came to the brink of what was undoubtedly a precipice, judging by the echoes. The air was foul, and I felt increasing dizziness. Terrifying thoughts were racing through my mind about giant rock pythons I've seen around this mountain. As I crawled along, getting weaker and losing hope of ever coming out alive, I saw a tiny streak of light. It gave me super strength to worm my way towards a small cave, mouth half a mile from the one I had entered. Reaching the open air, I gulped in lungfuls of it and fell down exhausted. I later found out that I had been underground for 5 hours, most of the time on my hands and knees. A king's ransom would not induce me to enter those caves again. It is, end quote. It is rather frightening glimpse at what can happen to those who dare to venture into the odoriferous hissing caves of Black Mountain, and perhaps a hint at the last things those who vanished here ever saw. It is certainly enough to dissuade most from trying to find out. Did those unfortunate souls merely get lost and die alone in the dark depths of the mountain caves? Or was there something more sinister at work? Perilous crevices, demons, vengeful ghosts, giant snakes, UFOs, aliens, reptilians, slaves, masters, undiscovered predatory cats, the list of supposed culprits is vast. Few are willing to investigate further, and many of those who have tried have described feeling hopelessly confused, lost, and beset by a stifling feeling of intangible dread and panic when exploring here. The caves have been described as being complex and highly unpredictable, full of treacherous and drops, yawning chasms, shifting, dropping, or even exploding rocks and boulders, unsteady footing and jagged, sharp walls. The brutal heat pervading the confines of the passages, as well as an intermittent foul stench, the wailing and moaning emanating from the darkness, and the hundreds of fluttering bats everywhere only further enhanced the sense of danger and disorientation inherent to this place. Many cave explorers have described exploring the caves of Black Mountain as being a singularly unpleasant experience that none wish to ever try again. Most tourists who visit Black Mountain National Park are content to view the foreboding mountains from a safe distance away. Whether one believes any of the folklore or spooky stories surrounding Black Mountain, it is certain a harsh, unfriendly place that instills a certain sense of unease and dread in those who see it. There's a sense that this menacing mound of boulders in the middle of the Australian wilderness is a place shunned by the rest of the natural world, an enigmatic place of natural wonder, mystery, and intangible fear. The Black Mountain of Queensland continues to stand tall over the terrain, perhaps just a pile of boulders, or perhaps watching and maybe even inviting more souls to join its many unfathomable mysteries. Another supposedly cursed place in Australia is an unassuming river meandering 440 miles through the northern tablelands and northwest slopes districts of New South Wales, Australia, is the Damboy River, which passes the towns of Gunnedah, Bogabri, Narabri, Wee-Waa, and Walgett along its course. Although most of the river's route is marked by picturesque scenery, this scenic facade hides a variety of little-known cases of strangeness, with a definite malevolent flavor to them. It was here along the Namoy River, near the town of Wee-Waa, that in 1908 two friends by the names of Harry Johnson and Stanley Williams set up camp for the night at a scenic spot which was known as one of the prettiest locations along the river and was quite popular among campers at the time. It was a camping excursion from which only one of the men would return alive. Stanley Williams, after a massive search for the missing man was launched, Harry Johnson's decomposed body was pulled from the bottom of the river, where it had been anchored intentionally by a heavy iron bar typically used as a break block bar for a wagon strapped to its back. William was quickly apprehended under suspicion of murdering his friend out there at the secluded spot, and the subsequent trial would bring to light just how gruesome the killing had been, with the murdered man's skull apparently having been brutally bashed in with a hammer. One piece of testimony in the case by Dr. Willis, published in the Sydney Morning Herald of January 11, 1909, said, quote, "The body was exposed to the air for probably 4 or 5 days. The body I saw may have been dead only about a fortnight. Senior Sergeant Sheridan placed a hammer in my hands this morning. I fitted it to the hole in the skull of the murdered man, and found that it fitted exactly into the hole punched there in the fracture behind the ear." Williams staunchly denied any wrongdoing, even in the face of these damning accusations and the fact that he had been the last person to be seen with Johnson, right there where the murdered man had been found. However, the proceedings were never able to concretely link Williams to premeditated murder. No clear motive could be ascertained for why he would want to kill his good friend, and the best that authorities could do was a charge of manslaughter, for which the perpetrator was sentenced to 10 years of penal servitude. With Williams convicted and punished, it would seem that This might be the end of the whole tragic affair, but this was where the weirdness would begin. And it would become apparent that whatever horrible thing had happened there by the river had perhaps left some sort of evil stain behind it. Hadn't been there if that hadn't been there all along. During the investigation, one news correspondent for the Border Morning Mail and Riverina Times spent a good deal of time following up on potential leads to the mysterious case, and in his travels met the acquaintance of a Thomas Underwood, who lived not far from the scene of the brutal killing. Mr. Underwood would go on to tell of various strange, menacing occurrences that had started to occur in the area in the aftermath of the murder. One of the odd accounts related by Underwood was the story of a man by the name of Arthur Parrott, who had gone to camp in the area, totally unaware of the vicious killing that had transpired there. When Parrott had arrived, his two wagonette horses had reportedly become extremely agitated, and this state of panic would get worse until it finally boiled over and the horses, foaming at the mouth in total fear, broke free and fled into the night. A cursory examination of the area turned up no reason whatsoever for what could have spooked the animals so badly. The next day, the perplexed Parrott would find his two shaken horses a few miles away from the scene, wandering around aimlessly in the wilderness. Despite this unsettling experience, Parrott would pass through the area again the following week and found that his horses refused to go anywhere near the place where they had camped the week before. It was then that Parrott had approached Underwood and requested permission to use his paddock to keep the horses for him while he was away. Parrott would further relate to Underwood how the area had filled him with a sense of dread as well. And Underwood would later say, he, as in Parrott, did not relish the idea of again experiencing the uneasiness of mind which had attended him when last he camped there. Parrott's two sons had experienced some amount of strangeness when camping in the area as well, when their horses also suddenly panicked and broke from their tethers to desperately flee, including one old horse that had never been known to be prone to such things. Again, in these cases, the two sons had also been unaware of the gruesome murder that had taken place there at the time. Numerous cases of horses going insane with fear and fleeing the area were turned up, and this seemed to be a rather regular occurrence near the murder. The correspondent, his curiosity piqued at such spooky tales, requested that Underwood take him to the area where Johnson had been murdered. When the two arrived, the correspondent noticed that the area was very quaint and picturesque, stating that it wasn't an ideal camping ground, beautifully situated and well grassed, yet sinister reminders of the horrible crime remained. The tree under which Johnson and Williams' tent had been situated still bore bloodstains splattered over its trunk, and the strange observation was made that although the grass grew in plenitude all around the site, the ground where Johnson's body had lain was completely bare. The correspondent also experienced for himself a sense of deep unease that descended over him even as he stood there examining the site, likening it to a feeling of impending death, and he very much felt that he wanted to leave as soon as possible. This sense of foreboding and doom that was said to permeate the site like a black cloud was experienced by others as well. In one account, a couple came to the area on horseback to camp for the night. It is probably not surprising by now that the horses promptly hightailed it out of there. In this case, suddenly bolting wildly into the wilderness to never be seen again. That evening, the woman suddenly became extremely upset and began having potent panic attacks and hallucinations for no discernible reason, during which she began to madly rant that she was struggling in a sea of human blood. The woman became steadily more unhinged, writhing about on the ground and shouting like a lunatic until the distraught husband went to get help. He finally found himself at the house of a local named Mrs. Mackenzie, who listened to the whole series of bizarre events before informing the man of the murder and other weirdness that had been going on at that same spot, of which the man had been unaware. Terrified by the story, he went back, collected his wife, and the two hastily left the area. Allegedly, the woman immediately started to calm down as they retreated from the vicinity, and by the following evening she was back to her old self, having no real recollection of what had happened to her. Other reports from campers in the same area described a variety of strange phenomena as well. Often reported were panic attacks or paroxysms of terror, sheets pulled off of bunks, tents disassembled by unseen forces, extreme powerful hallucinations, both visual and auditory, and of course, the profound fear the place invoked in animals. One such camper who experienced some of these bizarre phenomena stated, "I would refuse all the gold of the empire rather than go through a similar experience again." Interestingly, in every case, the witnesses had been unaware of the murder that had happened there, and were not told of it until after they had their brush with the unknown. The correspondent who had investigated the area in the wake of the murder will go on to chronicle many of these reports in a piece in the Border Morning Mail and Riverina Times on June 25, 1910, entitled "The Namoa River Tragedy: Weird Facts That Are Terrifying." All of this is strange enough, but the Namoi River had been the site of its share of weirdness since even before this sensational murder and its ensuing seemingly ghostly phenomena. It had long been an alleged favorite haunt for a terrifying unknown creature called the Bunyip. Excuse me a minute. Let's find out what the Bunyip is. Which is usually said to be some sort of monstrous amphibious creature prone to great aggression. One notable account of the Bunyip at the Namoi River comes from the 1830s, when an outlaw turned bushman named George Clark came here to live as a fugitive in the remote wilderness among the local Gamilaroi tribe. When a police posse came through looking for Clark in 1932, a tribal elder explained to policeman Captain John Forbes that the river was inhabited by a dangerous creature known to them as the Wawi. This aquatic creature was described as being enormous, having finned feet, formidable teeth, and a tusk, and was said to let loose with a horrific wailing noise on occasion. Forbes would write in his diary later of the Wawi, saying, "All the natives express fear of it, and say that it will devour them if it can catch them in the water." There would be other mysteries and unexplained phenomena reported from the Nomoi in the following years as well. In 1934, the river would be the location of a baffling unsolved disappearance. An article on Friday the 23rd, 1934, in the issue of the Sydney Morning Herald, explains the disappearance of a stock and station agent by the name of George Knott from the village of Peliga, New South Wales. The man had gone out for a drive along the Namoi River and simply vanished. Being last seen at 10 a.m., after a week of being missing, Knott's car was discovered at the bottom of the river. Yet the body was nowhere to be found, and bizarre clues left behind baffled police. In the rear compartment of the car were found bullet shells, which were all .22 caliber bullets of the short type. Yet no real significance was attached to them, because Knott had been a keen hunter and sportsman who was known for going on frequent shooting expeditions. A hole was found in the hood of the car that at first seemed to be from a large caliber bullet and was seen as an important clue, but the size of the hole exactly corresponded to that of a stud on the hood, and so it was later determined that on the hood of the car had been folded back by the river current, had banged against the stud and formed a hole. The exterior of the car showed no other signs of damage. The interior of the vehicle did little to shed any light on the case either. Inside the car there were no signs of a struggle except for some broken fittings in the front of the compartment. But this was not seen as definitive evidence of foul play. There were also no signs of blood in the car, and while the river could have possibly washed it away, the article stated, quote, "Wet blood might have been washed away when the car was driven into the river, but blood dries quickly, and even after a very short time would have left an indelible stain." End quote. The only other clue left behind was that there was a missing set of tools. Police set up a camp along the Namoi River and systematically dragged the bottom for a mile, but the body could not be located. Interviews of dozens of locals living in homesteads in the area turned up nothing, as no one reported hearing or seeing anything suspicious or strange. The mysterious vanishings of George Knott has never been solved, and his body has never been found. Besides stories of Bunyip's mysterious murders, ghostly activity, the cloud of dread hanging over the murder site, and unexplained vanishings, the Namoi River has other bizarre tales attached to it as well. An article from the Sydney Morning Herald dated March 23, 1973, talks about the mysterious sudden appearance of large amounts of dead fish in the river near the cotton farming community of Weewa. In this case, the dead fish steadily appeared for over a week, and any birds that fed on them were reported as dying as well. Although health authorities looked into the matter, no discernible cause of death could be found, nor any reason why birds should die from eating the fish. It was finally speculated that the phenomenon was perhaps linked to overuse of insecticides in the wake of a caterpillar plague that was ravaging the area's cotton crops or around the same time, but this was not conclusive. It is not clear if this sudden mass fish die-off has anything to do with all the other strange phenomena of the river, but it certainly is odd. Are any of these strange occurrences related? Or is it just a series of dispersed cases of strangeness that just happen to have happened along the same river? Is a ghostly phenomena reported from here related to the murder of Harry Johnson and his ghost? Or is it indicative of some malevolent force imbued into the very land itself, making it a cursed or evil place that is causing these tragic events? It's hard to say. Moving out along the Bruce Highway, 60 kilometers south of Cairns in northern Queensland, Australia, three streams rush down from atop Mount Bartle Frere, meander through untouched rainforest wilderness, and converge among some large boulders near a nondescript town called Babinda. What has come to be known as the Babinda Boulders is well known for the inviting, crystal clear waters of the streams and the idyllic, picturesque natural beauty to be found all around, which have served to attract droves of tourists to the spot every year. However, what many of the photographers, campers, and hikers at this peaceful spot, as well as the swimmers wading through the calmer portions of the pool, might not be aware of, is that the site goes by another, far more ominous nickname of the Devil's Pool, and has been feared by the Aborigines of the areas for centuries, perhaps with good reason, as it is a place long steeped with death, foreboding, and a dark reputation. The native people of the area have long shunned the deceptively quiet pool, and one Aboriginal legend is particularly tragic. According to the dark tale, there was once a young beautiful woman from the Yidinji tribe named Ulana, and this maiden married a respected tribal elder named Warunu. Warunu. When she met a handsome younger man from another tribe, she set forth into a torrid affair, running off away into the wilderness with her newfound lover. Unfortunately for her, Ulana's husband was a powerful man within her tribe, and he sent out search parties to hunt the pair down to put an end to their adulterous tryst. When they were finally surrounded and separated at the Bobinda Boulders, Ulana is then said to have thrown herself into the water and drowned, rather than face a bleak life without her true love. According to the Aboriginal tales, she has never really left, and still prowls these waters, looking to lure young men to a watery grave. This legend has become notable because over the years a large number of young men have mysteriously met their deaths here, and since 1959 at least 17 people and more still in old newspaper clippings have drowned here under decidedly strange circumstances. In many cases, the victims are said to be forcefully pulled and held down as if by unseen hands. The site is said to be particularly aggressive towards men and those who disrespect the pool in any way. In one story, a young man visiting the area took a kick at one of the signs there, after which he slipped, fell into a deep pool, and drowned. Other mysterious deaths here are not as clear, such as that of 24-year-old Peter McGann, who in 1979 was climbing up a boulder, jumped a small gap, and slipped to go tumbling into the water below, after which he simply vanished without a trace. It would take teams of divers over 5 weeks to finally find his body lodged down in the murk at the bottom of the pool. One rescue worker who helped in the search, police diver Peter Tibbs, explained the scene thus, quote, "I've been called on 4 times to try and find bodies down there, but one of the most interesting of these cases was a young fellow called Patrick McGann. We thought we knew he was in there, but we couldn't get to the body because the water is so cold. It's so deep and it flows so fast. And so 8 or 10 times we went down and we eventually cut the logs out of the place underwater. And on the last day, after we'd almost given up, we cut the last log that was in the chute and the body floated freely. And that was 5 weeks and 5 days from the time he'd gone missing. So it wasn't a pretty sight, but it was a great relief to get the body out and satisfy the family." End quote. There was also the case of a young couple that was swept away by a freak flash flood at the site as they were taking in the view, with a woman surviving, but the man never heard from again. Perhaps the most recent and dramatic account of a mysterious death at the Devil's Pool is that of 23-year-old Tasmanian naval seaman James Bennett, who had been out for a day exploring the area with some friends in 2010. The group had jumped over a safety railing to sit in a natural tub of churning water known locally as the washing machine. According to one of James' friends, he had been swimming in a calm area nearby when he was suddenly and violently yanked backwards, as if by an invisible hand, which seemed to be dragging him back towards a section of churning white water at the back of the pool. James then allegedly reached up to grab a branch, which snapped, after which his head went under water, and he just struggled there, suspended helplessly in the water, for no apparent reason, with just the tips of his fingers protruding from the surface as he struggled to come up for air. He would remain like this while his friends tried to reach out to him and offer their extended legs before sinking into the depths to his fate. It would not be until 3 days later that the body of James Bennett would be found floating about it in a calmer section of the stream, and a plaque would be erected in the aftermath, eerily reading, "He came for a visit and stayed forever." Most of the area is now closed off, although the inviting locale constantly draws visitors in. Such tragic incidents are so plentiful that the area has had numerous railings and warning signs set up over the years to denote the places that are safe for swimming. Why so many have suddenly drowned in the mostly calm pools here depends largely on who you ask. Officials will tell you that it is all due to fast running water, freak flash floods, or untamed currents stirred up by the natural lay of the stream and the boulders dotting it. This could in turn pull people under and pin them against the rocks, or wedge them under sunken logs, drowning them in a fashion that could quite possibly be witnessed as some sort of mysterious unseen force. The high oxygenation of the water here also does swimmers no favors, and all this is said to make the conditions in the off-limits areas difficult for even the most experienced swimmers to navigate. Indeed, even the divers who have entered the pool to look for bodies have been met with harrowing water conditions at times, despite typically being solidly tethered to the land by rope. One local official said of the dangers of the pool, quote, "They call it the washing machine, where he went in because it goes round and round. It's all bubbles, so there is no buoyancy. It's dangerous water. It sucks you under. You always see people swimming in the dangerous holes. You don't know when a flood could come down from up top." End quote. However, others point to the fact that not all of these deaths were the result of actual swimming, with some suddenly slipping and falling into the water for no reason, and almost all of them were male, 16 or 17 of the official count, to be exact. This is to be telling evidence that perhaps the aboriginal legends about the pool are true, at least to some degree, and only adding to this mystique are the varied reports of a disembodied woman's voice calling out into the night, and even pictures that claim to be of ghostly eyes, faces, and other unexplained images lurking under the water here. A picture taken of the site by the father of one of the victims was described thus, quote, "When the father came down, the police took him out and showed him where he went down, and he took the photo of that. And he came back, and they showed him where they had found him tied up there. And when he went over to Innisfail the next morning to get them developed, that's what they found, the photo. He's even got the cigarette in his mouth." End quote. Here we have an old myth intertwined with modern ghost stories and strange death, making it hard to really pick apart what could be real and what is all pure lore. Whether one believes the straight legends of a dead village woman or not, it is hard not to wonder whether this might just be one of those places that seems to be infused with some sort of negative, malicious energy. Is this all the result of natural phenomena, a ghost, or something else? It remains unknown, but something to think about if you're ever looking to take up a dip at this mysterious place. Is there anything to the cases we have looked at here, or are all of these accounts the result of exaggeration and imagination on the part of the witnesses and the news reports of the day? It is interesting to think about the idea that a place can perhaps be pervaded by forces beyond our understanding, or that tragic events might somehow implant themselves into a location like a voice onto an audio tape, Whether this happens or not, places like this are certainly strange and make one wonder if an area or place can be possessed by mysterious forces, and indeed whether it can be evil. So there you go. Yes. So, yeah, Australia has, they have that outback, but yeah, there's a lot of weird places out there, which is what this is all about. Weird places, weird people, weird experiences, eerie, eerie, eerie to the nth degree. So I will be back with you guys soon. Till next time, take care.